Okay, I think we'll make a start. Good afternoon, good evening, everybody. My name is Paul Mesro. I'm the Pro-Vice Chancellor of the Arts, Education and Law Group here at Griffith University, and it's my pleasure to be your host here for this evening for the 2015 Arts, Education, Law Annual Professorial Lecture. I'd firstly and importantly like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land in which we gather this evening, the Jagera people and the Turrbal people, and pay my respects to their elders past and present, and extend that respect to other Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. Colleagues, there's many colleagues here from Griffith, and there's students and there's alumni, but importantly there's members of the profession here, particularly the teaching profession, and I just want to welcome everybody to this important event. You may wonder what is the Arts, Education and Law Group and what's the significance of its professorial annual lecture. The Arts, Education and Law Group is the largest of 4 academic groups at Griffith. We're the most diverse group. We're the group that includes the creative and visual and performing arts. We're the group that includes the professional schools of education and law and journalism. And we're the group that includes all the humanities and the social sciences. So we think we're the most interesting group, but we don't want to be too partial because we're one big university. And we're a university that's still very young, but we're a university that's very aspirational. We're keenly committed at Griffith and at the Arts, Education and Law Group to the social dividend, at having programs that are of interest for students and staff, but also doing research and performances which really try to make a difference. So whether it's our colleagues who are doing research in teacher education or in law and human rights, we think that our contribution to society is in part through the students that we teach, the performances we give on South Bank, but also the research questions we ask and the opportunity to translate that to make a better society. And it's within that context that we've developed the Arts, Education, Law Professorial Lecture. This is the 4th lecture that we've been able to deliver. All of the lectures have been well attended and well delivered. They're all on important topics that reflect the skill and expertise and professionalism of our professoriate, of our professors. And the topics are significant for the community. And tonight's topic is a great illustration of a topic of enormous significance for our community. What makes great teachers? And we all know that this is an important topic because we've all been exposed to great teachers and not so great teachers, and we know that if you've opened up a paper or turned on the television, that the role of teaching as a profession has probably never been under more scrutiny than it is now in 2015 in Australia. And so we're very well placed tonight to hear from an international expert and one of our own to talk to us about the importance of making great teachers. So we all have a vested interest in this topic, given that we live in this community and we want to make sure that young people today who are in school have an opportunity to learn from great teachers. And so our guest is Donna Pendergast, who's the professor at Griffith, but also I'm pleased to say she's our Dean and Head of the School of Education and Professional Studies. Donna's been in that role for the last over 5 years. She's been at Griffith for about 8 years. It's been my distinct pleasure as Pro-Vice Chancellor to work with her in the last, since I've been in Pro-Vice Chancellor. She's been in a leadership role. She's an expert in middle years and literacy and numeracy in middle schooling. She's conducted a number of research projects of national and international significance looking at literacy and numeracy. She's done a lot of evaluation work for Education Queensland, looking at virtual schooling services. She's been involved with evaluating several of the reform initiatives by Queensland Education. And she's been a producer of several books, teaching in the middle years, the millennium adolescent, and the interesting title, Groovy Chicks and Blokey Blokes. Colleagues, without further ado, please welcome to the stage Professor Donna Pendergast.
Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me at the back up there? Is that working okay? Thank you. Thank you for the introduction, Paul, and it's lovely to be here this evening and to see so many faces. It's been a big day, so I appreciate that you've added to your day by being here this evening. The topic that Paul asked me or invited me to present to you this afternoon is around making great teachers, and it's such a big topic and it's such an important topic that when I was confronted with it, I thought, well, where do I start on this? What is the most important message that I can share with you this evening, and what is it that you might like to hear? The audience tonight is a combination. We have students here from Griffith University. Thank you for being here tonight. We have many people from the teaching profession itself. So we have teachers, we have principals, we have heads of department. And we also have people from Griffith University who've come along out of interest, I'm sure, and also support for the AEL professoriate. But all of us have an interest in the education of our young people. And so I think from a wider community perspective, this topic is one that, as Paul has indicated, is on the news. It's in everybody's daily kind of thoughts as we see the initiatives around refining and supposedly adding quality to teaching practice being right at the forefront of some community work. So I'm going to investigate what is it that we know actually makes effective teachers. What is the evidence around that, and what are some of the things that we can do to make quality teachers? So how do we make great teachers? When I was asked to present tonight, I was asked to be fairly formal, so I'm being a little bit formal. I will relax and also share some anecdotes as we go, but there is a fair bit of information that I'd like to share with you. So in the interest of making it a little bit more visually appealing, I do have some PowerPoints, but I promise you I won't PowerPointless you to death. Just keep it interesting. So what I'm going to draw upon this evening is the question, what makes great teachers? And I'm going to look at the global education megatrends, which are those big influences that have an effect over 20 years or so, and look at those in the context of young adolescents and young people in our schools. So our primary school students, our young adolescents in our schools, and their particular generation, currently our Z Genners and our Alpha Genners coming through. So I'm going to talk about what is it that those young people need and what are the trends that are influencing them and education in general. And then, therefore, what are our teachers that are going to actually work in this particular context? And when the slides work, beautiful, here we go. So the students' needs and demands are really crucial to any work that we do in terms of working with teacher education. The proposition that I'm going to present to you tonight is that great teachers are essentially the product or the key ingredient to quality teaching, which is the key ingredient to student achievement. So therein we have the formula, if you like, for effective student outcomes. There are four main areas that I'd like to share with you this evening. One is that there are a number of issues associated with the careful selection of initial teacher education students. And those items or those areas of interest are important for us to consider and whether or not they're actually selection into teacher education programs or not, or that they're actually something that we should be considering as graduate outcomes. The second area that I'm going to look at is what makes a successful initial teacher education program. So what are some of the key ingredients that we should be looking towards in order to shape or make those people who are going to be our teachers of the future? Then I'm going to point to the importance of induction. And research in this area is absolutely unquestionable in that the induction of teachers into their working situation and their support of those teachers for a 2-year period is absolutely the make or break of a great teacher. So induction is a crucial area to consider. And finally, we're going to talk about a commitment to professional learning. So what is it about a great teacher that enables them to continue to be a great teacher over time? Because our society is rapidly changing, and so to create a great teacher for now, 2015, might be quite a different proposition to creating a teacher that's going to be effective in 20 or 30 years' time, which some of our graduates will continue to be in the workforce in that time. So that's the overall approach I'll take. I'm going to start by sharing with you my statement, and that is this one, that nothing improves student achievement, which is what we're all about with teachers. So teachers' role fundamentally and at the core is to improve student achievement. That's their job. And so if that's their job, then we can identify some of the features that make them effective in undertaking that job. Nothing makes more difference to achievement in students than a great teacher. And the work of John Hattie and others suggests that the student themselves is about responsible for 50% of the effective learning, the teacher or their range of teachers about 30%, and then a combination of principal, parental support, the school community, etc. All of those factors collectively about a further 20% and up to 10% on each of those things. So having that teacher slice out of the pie of what makes an effective teacher gives you a sense that up to a third of student achievement is directly related to the effectiveness of the teachers. So a considerable impact on outcomes. So the relationship then between teacher quality and student learning is the point that I'd like to make. The evidence around the effect of teacher quality on teaching quality is uncontested. It used to be contested, it's now uncontested. So in other words, to have an effective teacher is essential to have effective teaching, but effective teaching is not exclusively about having a quality teacher. There are a range of other factors that combine with that to provide a quality teaching experience for students. So those are those other factors that we talked about that Hattie identified as being critical to the overall teaching quality of experience of students. Teaching quality, and that is how teachers go about doing what they do, is comprised of two key elements. And those elements are having a clear professional identity, so a sense of what that person does and how they operate, and also having efficacy as an educator. And efficacy is, as you can see there, comprised of two elements, confidence and competence. So to become efficacious as a teacher requires a high degree of development and a high degree of commitment in terms of those four areas that I've talked about already. So selection, education, induction, and then the professional learning. And efficacy throughout the career of a teacher is impacted by those four factors along the way. Because the effect of a quality teaching is cumulative, the effect on student learning is also cumulative. And why then should we consider the effect in terms of, what is the effect in terms of the quantity of effect? You'd be surprised to know that a quality teacher can have the same amount of student learning achievement in 1 year as an ineffective teacher will have in 2 years. So it becomes an exact doubling effect if you have a quality teacher opposed to a teacher that doesn't demonstrate the characteristics of that quality teacher. So a doubling effect. This is a really remarkable statistic and one that's well documented now in our research. So one of the things that we work hard to do is to ensure graduates who are leaving university understand the qualities of an effective teacher so that they can include quality teaching as part of their repertoire at all times. The effect of student learning then can be, or the pace can be halved if you have an effective teacher. The effect is also very much intensified because the students who are exposed to poor teaching can also lose interest and engagement in the learning process. So not only are they reducing the effect of the teacher, but they're becoming disengaged from the learning and so increasingly lose the cumulative effects of those of what might be an effective teacher practice. So we know then that quality teaching is an important relationship in terms of the next step that follows a quality teacher. But what makes up quality teaching? What is the comprehensive components that join together to make quality teaching? Well, to be a quality teacher, you have to be able to actually enact these three things. The first of them is personalised learning. Now, personalised learning is a relatively new term that we use, and it relates to things like student-centredness, individualised learning, being able to respond to the differentiated classroom. And interestingly, in our middle years classrooms, so from years 7 through to years 9, are where our most diverse learners in terms of the developmental effects on learning are actually situated. And it's not unusual for a teacher to have to deal with a group of 30 students who might have a developmental and cognitive ability that's 4 years in terms of the range of the learning that's taking place. So that's about personalised learning. So a teacher needs to be able to accommodate all of those abilities as part of teaching quality. The second dimension is relevant curriculum, and this is the reason why I'm going to look at the global megatrends and look at the nature of young learners, because having a relevant curriculum that's going to prepare young people for the future world of work and so that they can be part of the community in which they live is crucial to the learning that's taking place. So quality teaching must be based on a relevant curriculum. In many regards, our current curriculum in schools is fragmented, it continues to be overloaded, it continues to be, at this stage, not fully endorsed and fully developed. So challenges around curriculum remain a feature of the Australian school landscape, and it's problematic for that regard because whilst all of those political games are taking place in regard to what the curriculum is, the potential learning opportunities are being missed. And the third dimension is monitoring and evaluating learning. Probably the most well-known of the monitoring and evaluation of learning is reported by the Courier Mail regularly, and that is our NAPLAN scores. And of course, this is a slice of one type of learning that might take place. And it's typically not the type of learning that actually reports the overall kind of learning that we might like to see reported against. For example, creativity, the capacity to be collaborative, the capacity to work in groups, to set goals that might put you into a risky situation and achieve those goals. They're the features, such as having resilience, etc., that might be something that we would consider to report on. So when I look at this one, monitoring and evaluation of learning is all of those things. So it's NAPLAN plus, and then establishing the quality teaching situation to ensure that all of those capacities are enabled. So if you pull together great teachers and quality teaching, then students can achieve. So that's the premise of our conversation this evening. From there, I'd like to look at the global education megatrends. Now, megatrends are really just a simple way of capturing, of capturing some of the big influences out there in the world that are going to determine the shape of education. And global megatrends cover a period of about 20 years. And so these trends are the sorts of demographic changes, the community changes, the changes to the nature of our economy, to the way in which our politics is influencing society, and on it goes. The big one, of course, at the moment for us is the infinite connection. And that's the notion that with our digital world and the developments that have taken place, there is genuine potential that we can achieve education for every human being on the globe. It is genuinely possible to achieve that, at least up to a primary school level of education. At the moment, that remains one of the OECD goals in order to have an education that's equal and available for all young people. But among those global education megatrends is a notion in that first one that it's a global world, that the boundaries for young people who are in our classrooms are no longer the sorts of boundaries that have constrained learning in the past. So it is possible that young people can be connected to a classroom in another part of the world, to be synchronously involved in learning. And so a classroom might have a different kind of space and a different kind of being to in the past. But there are lots of threats to our world, and hyper-affluence, for example, that challenges the very nature of that global world and the health of those young people. And so the curriculum influences that sit around that are quite profound. So what we're actually teaching young people about globalisation and about affluence become questions there of being critically informed. So when is this a good thing? How do we make decisions in order to be able to improve the quality of life in this global environment? Living well provides us with great opportunities in terms of building communities, but it also presents us with, at the same time, challenges. Increased urbanisation, megacities, the growth of megacities in 2025 is a prediction. And in those megacities, we see the possibility of getting education because there is a density available in order to have the variation and the capacity to deliver. Skill and labour dynamics are constantly in the news at the moment. What will the jobs of the future be? What skills do people need to prepare for the future? What jobs will there be in the future? So what will be available? And so one of the important aspects of teachers' work at the moment in terms of teaching quality is to ensure that we teach students transferable skills and create in them a commitment towards being an expert novice. And that means being good at learning new things all the time, because what we do know is with the rate of change that's the capacity that they're going to need most of all. The fourth major global megatrend is that of modern families and the diversity of those modern families. They're smaller. There's a tendency to have a focus on infant and adolescent health issues, and there is late parenting. And there's also ageing societies. So the balance in the world means that young people and the next generation in some parts of the world will be supporting a very aged community. And so the effect of that in terms of education, the needs of those people and how it connects to outcomes associated with work are really crucial. It also means with late parenting that the average birth rate in a family has declined. And so that has made children in those families particularly special, and there's been a focus on developing certain characteristics, or the development of certain characteristics about those relatively smaller families. Okay, what should the school curriculum look like then if we were going to start with an opportunity to really shape up what should be taught? Then these are the factors that should be influencing us. And so that gives us the capacity to think about the curriculum that is going to be taught to these young people. And who are these young people? Well, generational theory is just one way to look at young people at this point in time. And I like it because we're all part of a generation. It gives a broad brushstroke about what it means to be part of a generation. Most of the teachers, or many of the teachers in schools at the moment, belong to the generation of baby boomers. That's the predominant generation out there. And that generation is people aged at least 55 or older. So half of the teacher population is in that particular category, 55 or older. When I was a student at school, and that's a little while ago now, the average age of teachers was 28. At the moment, it's just over 52. And it's probably the same people who are teaching, because the teacher profession has been one of great stability, actually, over time, and it has been an ageing profession. So the workforce itself has developed with the baby boomer generation. So it has taken on board those people and they become committed over time. So those young people who are 5 and 6 year old or 17 or 18 year old in our classrooms are in the main being educated by people who are baby boomers and X-Genners. Y-Genners are just now starting to enter the teaching market or the teaching workforce and have been for about the last 5 or 6 years. So there is an influx of Y-Genners about to move into the teacher workforce. But back to our students, we'll go to the teachers in a moment. our Z-Geners are basically the generation that are in classrooms today. So they're currently aged from about 6 to 20, so it covers that school age group. Zers were given a little tag name about 4 or 5 years ago, and they were called the feral generation. Okay, the word feral was used to describe them. And there's a lot of reasons why that was used, but some of them are quite, we'll unpack them in a moment. But the focus on Z generation enables us to understand that the formative years that those young people have shared have been dominated by an absolute shift compared to the teachers who are in the classroom working with them in the main. And that shift is from what's been a very digitally orientated world. So many of the teachers who are teaching currently actually had to transition through the digital times and the information age. And so they were learners, constantly having to take on board new things, to adapt, to change their pedagogy and to become effective in those environments. So many people in the teacher workforce right now have had enormous experience at adapting and changing and modifying their pedagogy. They're actually very, very highly skilled at doing that and highly effective at doing that. The problem is we're about to lose a lot of those people. So our generation Zs were born into digital culture. And so they're digital natives. If we use that generational theory, that's the type of way we can capture them. Teachers were mostly digital immigrants. The Alpha generation has been born since about 2010, and this particular generation has just started hitting our preschools now, and it's in our they are in our childcare centres. So those young people are very similar to our Z-Geners, and they're sitting on the cusp of the next, what will be a newly formed type of generation that will progress over time. What do we know about our Zs then? Because we're focusing on school education, is really important for us to understand in terms of creating great teachers, because these are the young people that our teachers are going to be working with. And so that imagery up there captures some of the key things that we need to know about. The Z generation has been captured by demographers descriptively with 6 main elements. The first is that this generation is switched on. So again, we're talking about access to digital technologies. We're talking about the fact that these young people have spent considerable amount of time connected to devices since their birth, and since they've been able to, I wonder why I couldn't see, I put my glasses on, that's better. And since they have been engaged in their learning. So these young people are switched on in a sense that they know a little bit about a lot of things. So they tend not to have a very deep knowledge that's gained from those experiences, but they have a broad, shallow knowledge. And so understanding the quality of that knowledge becomes a really important piece of work that teachers need to engage in. These young people are also exposed to a lot. So being switched on means that they have access to information in ways that previous generations didn't. And so there tends to be an effect in terms of being grown up. So this generation has grown up and is developmentally, we talk about developmental compression, because they've been exposed to lots of ideas, concepts and mature thinking that previous generations haven't been exposed to. The problem is they're not ready for it. And so that's led to high levels of anxiety and some developmental issues. So it's not appropriate that young people are exposed to adult themes simply because they can have it available to them. And so there are issues about being grown up in that sense. They are plugged in, and in this particular situation, our young people have been multitasking pretty much since they've been born. So many of them have had access to iPads. Can you believe they've only been out since 2010? They've become such a normalised part of our culture. But they might have a number of digital devices, and it's always fascinating to see some of those images of young children when they're handed a magazine and they try to flick the magazine, like a screen, because the screen, glass, is the new best friend of this particular generation. So when I was a child and I was exposed to glass, it was usually a window of some kind and I was told not to touch it. Z-Genners immediately touch glass to see what it will do and how it will respond to them. So it's also known as the glass generation for that particular reason. So our schools are starting to reflect that. It's taken a while, but our schools are starting to look like places that have glass surfaces, that have a space to draw on glass and to move glass as a device. But it's taken some time to get there. The average 8-year-old at this point in time is exposed to about 8 hours screen time a day right now. So it's very high levels of exposure. And as a result of that, cognitive functioning has changed. So if you look inside the brains of these young people, compared to the brains of a baby boomer or a previous generation, their synaptic pruning processes when they're young adolescents have been such that their brains have been wired differently. Now the effect of that still is being explored. Obviously these people are still growing up, but it means that they're capable of doing things differently to how we, as in other generations, are capable of doing things. So whilst we've learnt in typically linear fashion, young people looked for ways of moving around in non-linear forms, and so have a different way of operating in general. They are fragile, and this is the sense that they're not resilient as a generation. So resilience is born out of adversity, and when you spend pretty much most of your time protecting the smaller number of children, often one child or two children in a family, there is a lot of opportunity for risk-taking behaviour to be completely removed out of young people's lives. So they are fragile as a generation. That's not the individual child. You know, individual children have sorts of exposure to different things, but it does mean that there are behaviours associated with this. Quite often, lack of success by these particular young people means that they have failed at something because they're used to getting positive affirmations all the time. And so that relates to high maintenance. Our Z-Genners are a high maintenance group of young people. They're used to having merit awards, having ribbons for everything, participation rather than achievement. And so rewarding effort constantly is seen as one way of engaging students. Increasingly we know that that's not enough. We can reward participation, but we also have to differentiate between achievement and what's important. And so actually setting up opportunities for some students to excel and others not. But the idea is that we need to identify what each student is good at so that each student can actually understand their strengths and their weaknesses. The final of the 6 characteristics around Y-Genners is that they're empowered. Z-Genners is that they're empowered. And in this sense, Z-Genners are at the centre of the family. And so instead of parents and their obligations and their commitments governing the way the family operates, often it's the child's requirements, and the family hovers around and makes sure that those commitments are the top priority. And so a recentering of the focus of families and the way communities operate around Z-Genners has changed parental roles and in many cases grandparent roles as well. So if you can imagine these young people en masse, many thousands of them in classrooms, you can imagine that the effect is that there is a different level of requirements in those classrooms in order to meet quality teaching expectations. So we have different long-term benefits and outcomes associated with education, and we have different types of students in those classrooms. So a little bit about the teaching profession now, and moving on to this notion of making great teachers. Many centuries ago, great teachers were defined in a certain way, and those great teachers had the features, here we go, of conveying basic knowledge and skills. So teachers were the font of knowledge essentially. They held knowledge and they controlled who had access to that knowledge, and in what particular way that knowledge was shared. So teachers were very powerful members of the community. They were held in high regard, and they were able to sit in a very powerful position in the community. More latterly, and this is well into the 20th century, teachers became a little bit less focused on the knowledge itself, as we saw the Industrial Revolution actually change the role of teachers and knowledge became more widely dispersed and available. But it became a bit more about pedagogical know-how. So as well as that knowledge base, it was how to go about teaching that. So you could have a book sitting over here with all the knowledge in it, but having a great teacher meant that they could actually explore with you how to learn from that. And so teaching became about great pedagogy in order to learn, using the information that was now more widely available. Today's great teachers need to do all of this. So the shift of that from having a knowledge base is a really crucial moment. In our digital world, information age, information is actually readily available on almost anything that you could possibly imagine. Teachers' knowledge base is now no longer available only to them. It's actually widely available. So what teachers' work has become is about these aspects of their job. It's about being accountable to a whole range of stakeholders. It's about using evidence-based practices in order to have a whole set of repertoires that they know will work in certain circumstances. It is about professional self-regulation. So being in an environment where they're constantly under scrutiny, constantly able to be contacted and available to students in ways that previous generations haven't been able to access their teachers. There are external testing regimes which are high stakes and which are used in order to judge teachers' work. So teachers are being reflected upon in terms of student learning outcomes in ways that previous generations haven't. And we're being expected to use data to change the student achievement. These are all positive things. I'm not presenting them as negatives. They're positive things, but what they represent is a change to the nature of the teacher. And so teachers' work, particularly in the last 10 to 15 years, has become characterised quite differently to previous generations. So the teacher of the 16th century is quite different to the great teacher of the 20th century, and that is very much different to the great teacher of 2015. What we're generating at university at the moment is great teachers for the next 20 years, 30 years, 40 years. And so part of understanding that is to prepare our graduates to be lifelong learners and to be ready for professional learning. So we have clear challenges in terms of making these teachers. Since 2006, there has been a really rapid decline in the interest of people to become teachers. The numbers have declined quite sharply. And part of that is because of the context that I've just described for you. Teachers' work is no longer a simple process. It's a highly complex work, it's constantly changing, and it is at extreme levels of demand and expectation externally. Community perceptions around teaching is that it's not a highly valued profession anymore, that it's seen to be fairly instrumental. And as I've just explained to you and shared with you, and as you know, as professionals in the field, it's quite the opposite. So attracting students into the workforce, into the profession has been challenging. The workforce itself has similarly created some challenges for us. It's an ageing workforce. Our teachers, on average, as I've said, are well into their 50s. More importantly, school leaders, so our principals, our HODs, those people who are curriculum leaders, who are pedagogic leaders in schools, are also ageing, and many of them are about to retire. Our teacher workforce is also highly casualised, so it's less attractive for people to enter into the casualised workforce where they don't have assurance around work, Many of them are appointed for a period from February through till the end of November. So they don't have holidays, they don't have any assurance from year to year. So try to get a bank loan based on that kind of a job situation. There are critical shortfalls in the teaching areas of mathematics, science, engineering, and those critical shortfalls have been attributed to the whole nature of the changing demands around our society and the preparation that teachers have put into these areas. The demand has exceeded the interest to work in those areas. And there are decades-old problems associated with rural and regional shortages for specialist teachers. And yet, in terms of our quality teaching, we haven't really addressed any of those concerns in a strategic way for some time. Our workforce, move our little guy across. The data I'm going to share with you here is from the Queensland College of Teachers, and what they have been able to ascertain from the teacher workforce is that there are 3.5 times more registered teachers who are over the age of 60 than those who are under the age of 24. These are the youngest of the Y-Genners, those people who are under 24, and they were born from about 1975 to about 1994. And so they make up that tiny proportion of the workforce who are under 24 at this moment. 1/3 of the teacher workforce is expected to retire in the next 5 years, 1/2 in the next 10 years. So there is a profound, a looming teacher crisis ahead for us. The crisis actually hits at 2018, when there is no longer a stockpile of teachers who've been waiting to gain any form of employment, and where the choice for them will be absolutely amazing. So the shift in the nature of the workforce will need to be such that it will appeal to those people who are available and able to take on those positions. In this particular climate, it's an ideal time to be attracting people into teaching. Our first year students in their 4th year will actually finish their degree at a time when they have multiple employment opportunities. But this year we took in less students into our teacher education programs than we've ever taken before. So in order to change and to turn around community perceptions about teaching and the role of teaching requires considerable effort and considerable commitment from all of us. When the QCT asked their teachers out in the field, and all teachers have to be registered with the Queensland College of Teachers, why they teach, these are the reasons that they found. The ones in the centre, the red there, and the coloured ones were the main reasons that came up. For example, they wanted to make a difference in children's lives. They always wanted to be a teacher, so there was a calling for them. They wanted to share their knowledge, so a lot of it is about knowledge. They enjoy working with children. So these are people-orientated people, and so they're interested in relationships and in being with young people. Some of the less common reasons are dotted around. And, you know, some of these reasons are the reasons that have been used to criticise the profession. For example, the school holidays is often used as explaining why, you know, the teaching profession is not valued in the community because the massive holidays that teachers have. When in fact the intensification of teaching is such that a teacher's work doesn't really stop during the term. They're constantly working 24 hours a day. So, conscious of the time and moving this along. So it seems then that we need to be thinking about how to create quality teachers in a space where being a teacher is not necessarily a highly regarded community activity. I'm going to focus on careful selection as my starting point. And TMAG, the Teacher Education Ministerial Advisory Group, this year released a report called Action Now, Classroom Ready Teachers. And in that particular report, they identified a whole lot of things that need to be done in order to improve the quality of our teacher education programs and to guide the selection of students into the teaching profession. While much of the debate has been around academic ability, there's been little evidence that's been presented that suggests that anything other than academic ability is a measure of success in teacher education until recently. And so there are actually some indicators that have become more evident to us that can guide in some selection processes. Recent data provided by the Queensland College of Teachers explored 3,000 plus graduates of teacher education programs, and it found that our graduates have these particular features. 77% of them are females and they have an average age of 28 years. Prior to undertaking their teacher education program, 41% were employed in a field outside of education. Only 18.5% of the students enrolled in teacher education programs at this time come straight from school. Griffith University educates roughly 22 to 25% of graduates in Queensland every year. 52% of our students are in 4-year programs and 48% are in 1 or 2 year programs. 80% of graduates are working in a school in Queensland following graduation in 2013, and 52% of them are on supply or a contract of some kind. And so that's the nature of the workforce that we're creating. Now within that selection, you can see that selection associated with OP is really of little value when it only relates directly to 18 or so % of our students. So we need to be looking at a range of other factors that influence our selection into teacher ed. And so academic ability, in terms of the cognitive ability and verbal ability, really does matter for teacher education and in order to create quality teachers. But in addition to that, we know that non-academic capabilities also make a significant difference. Those are listed there for you. The motivators are really significant, and this is roughly a hierarchy of what's most important in order to create those non-academic capabilities that will lead to success, first in teacher education programs, and secondly as a quality teacher. So these are the factors. I'd point out to you the notion of self-efficacy. You'll recall that earlier on we talked about effective teachers have high self-efficacy. So they have confidence and competence. So it's unsurprising to think that those same people could have those abilities as underpinning their success in university programs. So self-efficacy becomes a really important feature to continue to look at. So too is resilience, because we know that the teacher workforce creates a whole lot of interesting challenges for people in terms of their efficacy and their ability to cope on a daily basis. So if we link these concepts together, we know that the education of our students can actually also contribute to what creates great teachers. And the two dimensions that we really need to focus on in our teacher education programs are around professional identity and around developing a self-efficacious student, so that they're both confident and competent to be quality teachers. At the same time, we have to keep in mind that they will also need all of those skills and capabilities to be able to deliver personalised learning, relevant curriculum, and to monitor and evaluate that learning so that they're actually delivering quality teaching at the same time that they're a quality teacher. So developing those well-formed dimensions is no particular news to us in terms of confidence and competence, but, I've skipped one there. Those are the professional standards that are then used to guide our program selection and approval processes. And there are no surprises when you look in there, when you look at the domains of professional learning, practice and engagement, that knowing, so having cognitive abilities in how to teach features, that being able to plan and to actually deliver effectively become effective features, and to engage professionally now and in the future are critical aspects of becoming a high quality teacher. In this regard, we believe in terms of teacher education that developing self-efficacy and the identity are the key. And to do that requires that confidence and competence to be focused upon in terms of the teacher education program. If you achieve mastery as a teacher, then you're able to be self-efficacious in terms of classroom practice and to lead to student outcome improvements. And that's the only context in which student achievement can be an absolute surety. So what are the mastery aspects that our classroom teachers need to have in place? Well, this is them. So if you are a teacher in today's classrooms, these are the absolute quintessential items that you need to be able to use and employ and evaluate at a highly efficacious level. The first is setting challenge. So in order to set a challenging learning task, of course, you need to know your students extremely well. Systematically using higher order questions and higher intellectual demand. Using cooperative groups and enabling whole and small group activity, which typically allows students to learn from each other. Because remember, the teacher is no longer the font of knowledge. Committing to assessment for learning rather than assessment of learning in order to provide challenges that allow students to take risk, to develop resilience and to have a growth mindset. And finally, connecting student feedback to data. These particular elements are what's called the powerful learning and teaching aspects. And those of us who've been hanging around teacher education for a long time will know that these are features that have cropped up year after year in a whole range of different, under a whole range of different names and used in a different set of ways. For example, productive pedagogies, which was a last decade ago, the really high quality, well-respected aspect of this work. So it comes back in different forms. As I said, connecting this for our student teachers is crucial in terms of the practice, so that our students in university programs are able to develop efficacy and mastery, that high level of mastery around those strategies, but also in the context of a classroom. It's really fascinating to see how many partnerships we have in place with schools in the Queensland area. And what I'm sharing with you here is that in our 2 models of programs, students undertake over 4 different professional experience opportunities, 80 professional experience days or 60 professional experience days in their 1 or 2 year programs. We have 2,639 initial teacher education students at Griffith University currently. We work directly with 458 schools in Queensland, and we undertake with those schools in those partnerships 60,531 days of professional experience every year. This is the data for 2015. Now, if you actually look at that in terms of how many years that is, that comes up to 16 and a half years that our students at Griffith University spend in schools in 2015 learning how to be great teachers. And they're learning directly from their teacher mentors. And as I said to you, those teacher mentors are those great people who've been evolving for decades as they've been through all the changes that have occurred in the teaching profession. So they're getting great experience to be mentored into the role of teacher. So amazing data, amazing statistic about the work we do, and our numbers are down this year. So that's teacher education. I'd like to mention the other 2 areas as we wrap up, and that is high quality induction, and then finally a little bit about ongoing professional learning, because they're the other 2 features of having great teaching. With high quality induction, as I've said to you, 2 years support is absolutely crucial in terms of keeping these young people committed to, or recent graduates committed to the profession. there is a statistic that indicates that 20% of graduates leave the profession of teaching within 5 years of their commencement. So 1 in 5 will leave teaching. I don't have a particular problem with that. You know, I think if people decide that the profession's not for them, then that's actually a really good decision. And many of those people actually return to the profession later on. So they have a qualification that is transportable and able to be used at different times in their lives. But what does concern me is when we look at the actual data about why people leave. And those are the reasons presented there for you. One is, and the very biggest one, is just the sheer demand of the teaching role and the massive changes that these young graduates, recent graduates, they're not all young, remember we said the average age is 28. So these new to the profession graduates have to actually deal with, and hence induction for 2 years minimum is so crucial. They're overwhelmed by the workload in many cases. Sometimes they're physically isolated and don't have the support of others. And they have a conflict between what they expected and what's the reality out there. So their whole perception of the teaching profession can be very much affected by their induction experience. Finally, I want to mention a commitment to professional learning. And given that we've said that these global megatrends will shape the way that education evolves over time, and that our Z-Genners and our Alpha-Genners who are starting to enter into our classrooms today are different to any previous generation, and that they have access to knowledge in ways that no previous generation has had, and that they need to be supported differently, and that we know what the teaching qualities are of a high-quality teacher in order to work with these young people, then a commitment to ongoing professional learning is crucial. Because as I said to you, there have been 3 phases in the evolution of teachers. We don't actually know how much more evolution will occur as the role of teachers changes in the near future and in that next 20-year gap and beyond. So a commitment to professional learning is absolutely crucial to have great teachers and to make great teachers and to keep them in that particular domain. To that end, Griffith University is actually launching a professional learning hub later in 2015, because we see the role of ongoing professional learning as being that crucial factor that's often left up to the profession to randomly attend to as the need arises. So taking a proactive approach to this is something that we're committed to doing, because we see the importance of creating great teachers. So I'm going to finish by allowing our most important element of the equation have a say about what makes great teachers. And that is the children in the classrooms. And our children in classrooms today, our Z-Genners, have this to say about great teachers. They say that great teachers are caring and committed. They know their subject matter, so they have the cognitive capacity to do that work. They build relationships, so they're oriented towards relationships and towards people. They support diversity, so they know and can accommodate and adjust to that individualised learning, so they have that teaching quality component. They're interested in students' outside lives, and they balance fun and fairness, so that students have a sense of being given a fair go in the classroom. Finally, they show responsibility to the students, because no longer is the power relationship in a classroom one of the teacher dominating, but it's now about a partnership in terms of learning. So our great teachers of today are really about building a relationship with their students and a respectful partnership towards learning. It's pretty difficult to argue with that, isn't it? Thanks very much for listening.
Thanks,
Paul?
Thank you, Deva. That was incredibly comprehensive and very informative. So thank you again. Colleagues, we have about 10 minutes for questions. Why don't we open it up? If you have a question, just raise your hand.
Yes.
Colleen? Thanks very much, Tom. Do you want to speak up? Sure. This might even work.
I've got two questions. I'm not sure if I can ask two though, Paul. The first one relates to the global megatrends.
Yes.
And I was wondering about to what extent would cultural competence be very important, given that if we look in certain parts of the world, Asia, Africa, we've got situations where half the population are under 30 years old. And if we look at the trajectory of our migration program, we could expect that many of those could be students in our classrooms right here.
Absolutely right.
So I would expect that one. The other one I was thinking about kind of relates to the way the mass media has been challenged by social media. But the mass media has kind of settled into this position where it has, you know, an authoritative role to play. There's lots of information out there, but if it makes it onto the mass media, it kind of says, well, you know, that's something that you can believe. It's probably true. In a similar way, when we're thinking about the qualities of a teacher, could it be that we're also there to sit as a filter, or maybe judge, might not be exactly the right word, but all the information that's available to young people today, is it part of our role to decipher from all of that what is relevant, important, necessary and accurate knowledge?
Absolutely, absolutely to both. So critical literacy is one of the key elements of teaching and learning that takes place. And cultural competence is crucial. So you've struck on two things that are absolutely crucial. So if you'd like to become a curriculum writer, but it is actually there, and we talk in the curriculum of general capabilities. And so those capabilities sit above, if you like, and they're the kind of things that are woven through. And quite often, members of the community don't even know about the general capabilities. But from a teacher perspective, that's what we actually think education's about, those general capabilities, and they do include those sorts of things. So collaborative processes, being able to make decisions, being able to have a cultural awareness, but that's not what is represented as being our curriculum. Our curriculum's often very siloed and separated, and it's around subject areas. So quite right, and I think the weaving those through very much reflects an understanding of the global megatrends. Yeah. Integration of learning is one of those, when we looked up there at the strategies that work, having groups and enabling groups to shape and reshaping classrooms around areas of learning and around different levels of learning and differentiation is often best facilitated when you take a meta approach that you've suggested, so around process rather than around content. And so we talk about rich tasks as providing an opportunity for that. Thank you. Yeah.
Trish.
I've got, I was very interested, thank you Donna, that was a very interesting lecture.
Thank you.
The statistic that really stuck in my brain was 77% of teaching students being female and
Yes.
the average age being 28. It seems like the education industry having really good maternity leave and, you know, like family formation and career formation are going to smack into each other. The other thing that it strikes me is you're then talking about Generation Y, who I think are the sort of
young ones,
21
yes.
to whatever,
Yes.
31.
Yes.
And the relationship between that generation and the baby boomers is critical, and whether as the baby boomers retire, keeping them on in some kind of mentorship role
Absolutely.
might be a strategy. But what are your comments about on those fronts?
Look, what's ahead of us in the teaching profession is really a one-off. It's never happened like this before. It's quite profound, and I think the mentoring, the loss of the baby boomers in such a big hit, because it hasn't been a staggered loss, it's going to be over just a couple of years, is going to have a profound effect on the workforce. It really hasn't been appreciated and understood until quite recently, because there was a delay in those retirements based on the global financial crisis. So ordinarily it would have been spread out over maybe 10, 15 years, but it will be a big hit in this sense. So one of the strategies, and you've indicated that this sounds to you like a good strategy too, is that idea of using those baby boomers to induct. And we talked about that induction needing 2 years of continuous support. So the idea of using that particular group of people who are retiring to actually induct the next generation, build capacity, get that mastery in place is a really powerful possibility. So that's how I think that could work.
Thank you very much, Donna. That was very informative. I was going to use Trisha's statistic, but do it from a different perspective. That 77% female in the profession looks to me like somehow the profession has been devalued. I mean, I want your opinion on this, obviously, but it looks as though it's been devalued in some way. And I was wondering if also a lot of the bad press that men get in terms of the way that they sexually interact often with young children, whether or not that's part of it.
I think it's part of it, absolutely. And look, it all contributes to it, but also teaching is a caring profession. So it does tend to attract, and particularly in primary school, it's more likely to attract people who are interested in people. And so there has been, over time, it's been strongly influenced by female generations. And so that tends to self-perpetuate then. So what tends to happen is that the same thing keeps happening again and again. So having a concerted effort to break that cycle is crucial. Young new graduates who enter into the profession who are males typically will progress quite quickly because there are opportunities available to them. So it's actually a good career for men entering into the profession because there are lots of leadership opportunities. You can imagine schools, regions, very high level opportunities. So using that as a lever I think is a good strategy. And we've had a tradition of also having subject areas that are gendered. And so dealing with that subject area gender issue is another strategy that's needed. So I think they're features of the workforce. They've been in place a long time and they have built a particular set of stereotypes around the profession that need to be attended to.
There's a question here, Donna.
Just a question. Thank you very much for that presentation. I really picked up on the theme that you're speaking about with fragmentisation and how the curriculum itself becomes disjointed for students.
Mm-hmm.
And then you went on to talk about rich tasks, and I noticed that some of the remote communities especially rely on rich tasks with a focus on process. I just wanted to get an idea of how that nuance might be different to other research I read about thematic, holistic curriculums and bringing together, if you like, curriculum based on themes and a holistic approach across the school. Do you see that as being different to a rich task and a focus on processes?
I think they're in the same family. I think rich tasks tend to be focused on quite often assessment for learning, so they're building up a series of processes over time that lead to a particular outcome. A thematic approach might be more of the actual context in which that operates. So I think they're very closely, they're part of the same family in that sense. Yeah.
Thank you.
Colleagues, we have time for one last question. Anybody? Yes, here.
Thank you. As a teacher in the vet sector, I know that the line between pedagogy and andragogy is sometimes pretty fuzzy. And most of my students are school leavers or recent school leavers, but we see a lot of the same issues with ad hoc curricula and generational changes and literacy problems, and it seems to be getting worse and worse every year. I'm just wondering, a lot of the things that, like right here on this screen, I would expect a lot of my students to say those things as well. So I'm wondering how much of this relates to post-compulsory education.
Look, I think great teachers would exhibit many of the same characteristics. I think what differs is that you're working with children and young people, so there is, the strategies are different, so you would expect a more mature relationship to be established, whereas with children, developmental change means that there is a lot of brain work going on. Not to say that adults don't have a lot of brain work going on, but the learning is quite different with mature age students. So their brains should be at a stage where they're really able to develop deep knowledge and expert knowledge. Whereas with young people who are going through all the developmental processes, we do want to try to expose them to a range and then develop complexity as we go through. So, you know, I think just saying exactly this, it's not exactly the same, because there is a whole series of developmental aspects around childhood and young adolescents that don't feature with adult learners. But many of the elements are the same. I mean, all of those things, you would hope that those would be part of a great teacher, wouldn't you, in any setting? So I think there's lots of transference, but it's not absolute.
Thank you for your question. Donna, thank you for responding to all these questions. Thank you for a very comprehensive overview of this crucially important subject matter. We do have a couple of gifts. Thank you, Donna.
Thank you. Thanks, Paul. Thank you.
And that's for the drive home. And some flowers.
Thank you very much. Thanks,
Thank you
Paul.
so much.
Lovely. Thank you. Thanks, everybody. Thank you.